So today my guest is Brennan Dunn, and Brennan is somebody who I've been following online for quite a long time. Because I just checked, actually, it's nearly 8 years, Brennan, that I first opted into your email list, courtesy of Troy Dean, who's another person in the kind of the web agency kind of space. So you're very welcome to the Recognized Authority.
Yeah, thanks, Alastair, for having me.
So I was going to do the one line intro, but you've done so many different things that it's very hard to do that one line intro for you. You're somebody I pay attention to. So I want to put that out there first off. Right now, yeah, you're the founder of RightMessage, the author of This Is Personal, and you write weekly at Create and Sell. A lot of people will know you if they've been in my world through the W Freelancing brand, and before that you had a project management software called Planscope,
That's
and
good. Yeah.
you had an agency before that. And I'm really interested because what you told me before this in the pre show was that when you were running the agency, you felt that you would like to have one of those businesses where you have lots and lots of customers and sell kind of cheaper, less expensive things to them. And it strikes me as really interesting because I have this conversation with people quite a lot. It's always like it seems like the grass is greener, whichever side of that divide you're on. If you're selling high ticket agency type, you kind of feel, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have kind of a smaller ticket, low touch stuff? And then if you're on the other side, you think, wouldn't it be nice to have less clients? What do you think about that?
I mean, it's funny. Like, we'll probably get to this, but I've actually come full circle. We didn't talk about this pre-show, but I've within over the summer I started a new agency, so I'm actually back to somewhat doing client work. But yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people who are doing service work for clients, get to the point like I did where you have a great client base, you have a waiting list, you have a great team, you've got all the right things in place. But then you realize that, okay, while I make great money and while we have like big, we our average budget was six figure plus for most clients. Um, if one of them pulled or if one of them, walked away, that was a shock to the system. Even though yes, we had a wait list, we could have, knocked on doors and so on and so forth and bump people up. I hated kind of that game of like the whining and dining that needed to be done, the long drawn out sales cycle, the meetings, the bringing in like this and that. And I had friends. A lot of what we were doing was building web applications for clients. So we were building MVP startups for people. And I had friends in that space who were happily selling $20 a month subscription software. And they're like, yeah, we've got a few hundred people paying us $20 a month and, you know, carve out a great living, work from the laptop in the cafe, don't need to talk to anybody unless they write in the support. And that's it. And the introverted engineer in me was like, that sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
so, so yeah, I actually that's kind of what led me down the path of thinking, could I safely exit the agency and kind of transition into software as a service? And that happened back in 2011. So it's been
Can you tell me and the listener the difference or what the relationship was between the project management tool, the software as a service, and then the content side of the business, the W freelancing part? Can you tell me how those connected and how one grew from the other?
yeah. So annoyingly, I say we, but largely me, along with some help from my team, built this initial tool called Planscope. So we coded it, we did the marketing website, we built the app, and we were very proud of it. But then I learned that I didn't have a clue as to how to get people to actually buy it. So that was the thing I had to kind of learn firsthand. And the best practice at the time, and still largely is, was to go and create content. So have a blog, write content, and hopefully the right people. So in my world, agencies and freelancers would find that content and then read it, like it, and get to the bottom. And there's a little banner ad or something that's promoting our software. They click on it, they buy it, and everything just works. So that was the kind of the operating model I went into for growing Planscope. It kind of worked, but I think the mistake I made early on was thinking that if somebody goes to Google and types in, how do I price a project, or how do I rate a proposal, or how do I get my first client, that having a call to action at the end of that article that links to a project management tool is a bit of a disconnect. So that led me down the path of thinking, okay, well, what if I can create other products that maybe can fund, if you will, the development of PlanScope and make us more money without needing to kind of try to fight over each and every new customer of PlanScope. What if we could just sell courses and workshops and stuff that would kind of teach what I learned building this agency? And maybe then finally they'd still sign up for PlanScope, but I could also make money doing that too. And that worked well. And funny enough, the Irish connection here is the reason I wanted to do that was I wanted to go to a conference actually off of Galway on Inishmore. And it was this random little conference called FunConf. And at the time, because I had put so much money into the development of PlanScope and I had gotten out of the agency, I didn't have the money to just fly to Ireland for a week. So I actually pre-sold a book to this budding email list, an ebook called Double Your Freelancing Rate, which would basically be everything I know about how to price projects. And it kind of worked, and I made money, and I made enough money to book the flight and book the conference. And again, that's how that's how your part of the world fits into to my trajectory. Running this business was that's what got me into the what we used to call the info product world, which is now the creator world.
That's class. I didn't know that connection either. That's hilarious. Yeah, Inishmore is the largest of the Iron Islands. It's just off the west coast, not a million miles away from where I live as well. It's a nice part of the world to be in, and what a great place for a conference.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah.
So, having been on both sides of that, and seeing the agency world, and then the kind of the larger scale kind of creator world where you're creating content, and now going back to agency, like what's the big difference in approach, or like how do you feel about that? Like, clearly you're going back to an agency again, so there's a reason for that. Can you tell me a little bit more about the decisions there?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I'm going back to it. I would phrase it as I'm adding a new offering to my lineup. So the way I look at it is for any problem domain. So in my world, that is the world of email marketing and website personalization and email personalization and so on. You have on one end of the spectrum, you have do-it-yourselfers. You have the people who want to buy a course, they want to buy a book or something. They want to go through it and they want to apply what you teach in a generic way to their unique situation. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people who just say, I want to throw money at the problem and get it solved. And the agency or consulting world solves that kind of done for you way of tackling the problem. And then you have the do it yourself way, which is the course creation and that sort of thing. So simply put, I wanted to cover the entire spectrum. I have a very successful set of courses and products and now a book that help people on the do it yourself side. But then the people at the highest echelon, the clients we're working with now with this agency, who aren't the sort who are going to buy a course. They don't want to do this themselves. They don't want to learn it themselves. They don't want to even equip their team internally to do it themselves. They just want to get me, who I've taught them how to do this stuff, in a way that is, you talk a lot about authority building. In a way that I've built up my own authority by teaching stuff for free publicly. I've entered on their radar and they've said, okay, great. He has this course. I love the sales page. I love what the course promises, but we don't want to do the course. It's not only time intensive, but it's also a bit risky. We'd rather just get the person who teaches the course to help us, even if it's not me, it's my team, execute on their own problem. So that's largely why I'm going back to it. It's not because I'm retreating or anything to it. It's because I'm trying to kind of complete the entire spectrum.
Right. Yeah. So it seems to me that the content creation and the courses and the information products that you've put a lot of time and effort into creating, now that they're created, you don't need to keep going back to those. So now you've freed up some time to go. Am I on the right track with that?
You are. And you always have the risk when somebody takes a course or say reads a book, that they might enjoy what you teach and get a lot out of it, but they could botch up the execution of it. Whereas with this, we're taking control over how we do things for our clients, which means we're able to get some really incredible case studies. So we're getting ridiculously good case studies that we can then use to bolster the broad appeal stuff. So getting people on our email list and getting people in front of the courses and so on. So we're looking at this as a way of not only being able to help a different kind of client who is not a course taker, but also be able to really kind of strongly guarantee that the work we do will actually yield a financial ROI for them, which then we can then deploy as case studies. And again, like I just said, get people onto our email list. Everything just works out. And we're already seeing that now where that kind of approach has been working really nicely for us.
So one part of this that I'm really interested in is the part where you started creating content, and that content, I'm interested in that journey of content creation. It's something I talk to people a lot about demonstrating your knowledge, sharing your expertise in order to build authority, because I think that's basically what we need to do. But I'm really interested in kind of where the line is for what we are creating and publishing for free versus what we should be putting into courses and charging for, or putting into, books and things like that. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I don't like when content creators or say people who are newsletters or whatever else just send sizzle content where it's just, it's motivational, it's a story. But then if you want to really get anything that is actually useful, you need to buy something. That's completely counter to the approach I take. My approach is that I want to make it so anytime I send an email, let's say, the email in its own right should be super valuable. So they should feel they finished the email, that it was worth their time to read it, and it was worth their time to get an email from me, right? So my thinking is I want to give away my best stuff. The difference, though, is the way I present my paid courses is these are more systematic frameworks rather than like a random smorgasbord of content. So the way I look at my newsletter is every week, or actually twice a week, I'm sending out material, but there's not a rhyme or reason. It's, this week it might be about something that I've learned writing a book. The next week it's about something that I learned about, I don't know, positioning or something, and so on and so forth. But the way I present my courses or my programs are, these are kind of curated, start to finish systems that aren't just training. So it includes resources. I'm a developer myself, so I've built like little mini tools that I bundle into my courses. They could be as simple as worksheets that are included, video case studies, video tutorials like walking through and showing how to use, say, an email system and do things with it, and even things like community or some degree of one-on-one access. So I think like the way I draw a distinction is when you get something free from me. So say you're on my newsletter, it's going to be random in the sense that it's not going to be like I wouldn't just deconstruct one of my paid courses and send it out over the span of 4 months or something to my list. It would be, it's going to be something kind of random, but it's useful. And on top of that, there's no one-on-one expectation or anything given. If you want the one-on-one, whether it's from me or somebody that works with me, that you pay more, you get more access, you get more specific application of what I'm teaching, and so on. So yeah, I'm a big fan of just I try not to hide anything with the free stuff. I try to make it I want people to be thinking, if this free stuff is this good, what's it going to be like if I buy the paid thing? And that's been my attitude.
Yeah, and with the random emails, I think you used the word random. I'm not sure if you did, but that's what I wrote down in my notes.
Yeah.
If those emails are seemingly random, do you feel that the expectation for people on your email list is that like they're okay with them with these seemingly random topics, or do you try and keep it fairly tight in terms of the topics that you cover? Because you mentioned something about publishing a book in one of them, and something totally different in. So what's the pattern there, or what's the kind of the underlying theme?
Yeah, I mean they're specific in the sense that my newsletter, for example, is all about helping people who sell digital products or coaching over email. So that's kind of that's the confines, if you will, of my newsletter. So with the book thing, for example, I was talking about how I'm using email marketing with my own list try to make the book a perennial bestseller. So everything I do is centered on that. I do sometimes flirt with things kind of out of bounds. So I talked about the whole process that I had for getting a publisher, getting an agent, and all that kind of stuff for the book, which technically has nothing to do with email marketing, but the book is about email marketing. So I had to talk about kind of some of the questions my publisher had with like, hey, a book's supposed to be broad appeal. Is this too niche? Is this too technical? And how I went through thinking about that. And people were really receptive to that. So I think like when I've asked my list, because I've asked them actually before, like, do you mind when I go out of bounds? Do you mind if I occasionally will talk about, how I went about hiring an assistant, or how I went about, organizing an event like a workshop or something? I think there's enough overlap with my audience where, because they're all selling, say, digital products, the idea of like, oh, here's how he got a book deal, or here's how he organized an in-person workshop. Like there's still enough interest, even though it doesn't directly align with like email marketing as a topic. But I tend to stick to just all things email. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And I feel you on that. Like I talk about how to build authority and all the related things, and there's so much related. Like we could talk about how you could use a book to build authority, to use podcast, email marketing, AI, for example.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to splinter off the AI discussion because I feel like I'm talking about it a little bit too much on this podcast. I'm actually going to splinter it off into its own thing. And then, like I actually talked about what you just talked about, how to hire a VA. I posted about that recently on my blog because a few people were asking me about that, and I wanted to kind of give them step-by-step instructions. I feel like that's all interrelated, and for me, that's all tightly aligned. But I can understand how somebody looking at that is thinking, this seems to be different or random, as you said. So that's something I've been thinking about myself.
Well, I think just to go back quickly to the random thing, I think what I really meant by that was that there's no, like, let's say for the next 3 months, I'm talking about nonstop things you can do with email marketing, but it's not necessarily that today's email builds on last week's email, which builds on the previous week's email. Whereas with
Yeah,
a course, I would expect that kind of progression.
yeah. It's kind of more episodic rather than serial.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And I wasn't picking on you using the word random. It's something that I think about myself for myself, and I feel like I can come across that way as well, with that kind of episodic jumping from one thing to another. But yeah, so I think that the building the audience and growing, like you told me, I think you had 50,000 subscribers and 10,000 customers
Yes.
for
Double your
W
freelancing.
freelancing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like when you started, like did you start from zero with that, or were you able to populate that, with some of your agency? I mean, I assume that most of those were not agency clients, right?
No, it started truly from zero. So early on, I kind of did the standard write blog posts, have an opt-in form, publish to the void kind of model. Um, what I ended up doing that worked pretty well was to go and get involved in online communities. Like at the time, there was Reddit had a freelancing subreddit. There was Hacker News, which didn't it wasn't exactly 100% freelancers, but a lot of people there were. And what I would do is I would get involved in discussions, and then I would find ways of cleverly linking to a blog post I happen to have on the topic in a way that didn't seem like a bot did it, right? So I would actually get involved. I'd write like a lengthy comment reply, and this stuff did not scale, but it helped seed the list. I'd write a lengthy reply and then just link to the article that I had on it. And I actually ended up getting to the point where I was like, oh wow, I've got like a nice portfolio of content that I can just use whenever. So if somebody's like, hey, what are your thoughts on um, what do I do when I get a new lead? Like what should I be doing initially? I was like, oh, got content for that now. I can just link to that instead of saying the same thing again and again and again. And then, so I started that way. And eventually, because I was kind of early, this was 2011, 2012, I did really well. I'm not an SEO person, but I somehow did well with like Google search. And I started to get a good amount of traffic from Google, which was helping a bit. And then what really helped was I started doing partner webinars. So I did events with companies like Woo Themes, with 99U, with Bid Sketch and stuff. And again, this is back 2012ish. So it was while people on the internet marketing side of things, I think we're doing this. I didn't ever consider myself to be an internet marketer in the like sales page kind of way of looking at it. Um, but I started doing kind of these workshops where I'd say to like Woo Themes, hey, I'd love to do this thing. I've got it. And this is after I created my course. So I had created that ebook I mentioned, the Double Your Freelancing Rate ebook. And I basically went on like a road show, if you will, trying to sell that ebook. And I'd go to Woo Themes and say, hey, most of your customers are freelancers or agency owners. I have this book that's kind of a primer on how to price. I'd love to do a thing like a joint venture thing. You get half, I get half of any revenue that we make from the workshop. The workshop itself will be super, valuable. I'm going to do a soft pitch at the end, but it won't be like just a bunch of like stuff. And then, oh, if you really want to get the secrets, you need to buy the book. And that did well. And I ended up getting in one summer alone about 15,000 subscribers to my list just from doing that. Because what I would do is Woo Themes or whoever would email their list to my landing page. We got the opt-ins. We'd have, 15, 20% of people who opted in actually attend live if we were lucky. But needless to say, 100% of everyone who opted in ended up on my list. Now, they weren't always the highest quality. It's not like somebody who went to a blog post and read it and loved it and then opted in. But it ended up kind of growing the list pretty quickly. And then from there, that kind of compounded things because I started getting more word of mouth and I started getting people backlinking to the site. And then it just started to grow and grow without me being ever. I hate saying this, but like I was really never that intentional about like link building or SEO or anything. It just kind of happened. And yeah, that eventually got it to where it ended up being, or it's now bigger than 50,000. But yeah,
That's pretty cool. So 0 to 50,000, and if you were to do it now, do you think that you would do it the same way? If you had to
well,
do it
now
again?
there are different tools now that I'd probably be looking at. So there's tools like on ConvertKit. There's the Creator Network. There's a tool called SparkLoop, which allows you to kind of partner with other newsletters or even pay for subscribers on a cost per action basis. I never actually paid. I never ran ads. I tried running ads for about 2 weeks on Double Your Freelancing, but I had no idea what I was doing, so I turned it off. But outside of that, I never really paid for subscribers. And I think if I was doing it today with a new business like that, I'd probably be doing not only that, but I'd be doing probably not as much on a like written content side, but maybe more on like YouTube or other platforms that have good distribution. I never really did anything with social back then. Because again, in 2012, people were using Twitter to talk about like sitting on the toilet. Like no one was using it to like promote their business and stuff. So it was pretty much all search from Google.
And it's come kind of full circle now, Twitter, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, let's segue into segmentation then. And can you tell me a little bit about why that's important and how that relates to what you talked about already?
Yeah, so I think what's most important to me and the kind of the experiment, or not experiment, but the thing I've been kind of exploring for the last 6 years has been, so back when I was selling consulting work, I used to really enjoy the fact that if I'm in a room with somebody or if I want a phone call with them and they come off as being pretty technical, maybe they've done this kind of thing before, they're in retail or some industry or something like that. I used to really enjoy knowing that I could kind of take the core thing that I say to most people and change it up depending on who I was talking with. So if they're technical, I'll speak more technical to them. If they don't care at all about the tech, they just want like a web app. Maybe they don't even know what a web app is. They want a website where you can do stuff. Um, then I would speak less technical to them. And I think anyone who's done high touch sales, we know that we're not just parroting a script. We're kind of modifying what we say based on what we're hearing, what we know about somebody, and so on. So how this applies to what I'm doing today. When I was doing Double Your Freelancing, our main product, the book evolved into a course called Double Your Freelancing Rate. So it started out as a book, turned into a full-blown course. The sales page had testimonials. It was kind of a standard kind of course sales page with like, here's what's included, here's testimonials, FAQ, is it right for you, all that kind of stuff. And I remember getting an email from somebody who was a copywriter, and she wrote in asking if the course was right for her. She had heard good things about it, but looking at the sales page, it saw developers and designers as the testimonials and stuff. And again, that comes from when I started out on Hacker News, it was mostly developers and designers who found my stuff initially. So I was able to kind of talk to her over email and let her know, hey, the course is agnostic about what it is you technically do. It's a course on how to sell yourself to a new client and how to price your work. Um, so I was able to salvage the sale, but it got me thinking how many other people had that same concern that they didn't see themselves in the product and closed the tab, but didn't email me. So that's when I started thinking, I put on my developer hat and thought, well, when I'm on Facebook, it's a web page according to my web browser, but I'm seeing my stuff, I'm seeing my friends. And when I'm on a sales page like mine, again, it's just a different web page, but I'm seeing everyone seeing the same thing. And I thought, well, what if I could if I could somehow know that this person was a copywriter, could I maybe change the testimonials on the page to be copywriters and to use language that is more copywriter-ish? And that's what I started to do, was just thinking, okay, well, I'm a developer. I can write some if else conditions and say, if they're a copywriter, because they've told me through a survey, then show the copywriter language. If they're a developer, show the developer language, and so on. So I started doing that, and then it started to really work well. And that's the segmentation angle, is like, you can't do that. You can't show more personal, more relevant content unless you have segment data under the hood. So I went down this path, started working well. I got on the radar of a few bigger companies who had a lot more skin in the game, notably being Teachable. And their founder, Ankur, reached out to me and said, hey, what if you stop screwing around with this shit on your own for your own stuff? And can we just throw you a lot of money and you make this a proper product, what you're doing on your stupid little freelancing site? Because this would be huge. Like this needs to be done. So we ended up raising a round of funding, led by Ankur and along with about 10 other investors, hired a team and built out this product that just took the manual code that I'd written and made it a self-serve tool that a marketer could use. Because the issue I had was I did try to make this a product, the code I was doing for W freelancing, a product that involved downloading a zip file and taking a bunch of JavaScript and saying, here's a little written text file on how to use it. Which you give that to the standard, like the average marketer, and they're going to be like, what the hell is this? Right. So that didn't work that well. But it eventually led to deciding let's make this a tool. Let's get back into the software game. I'd sold PlanScope, but let's try a new one. And that this is done much better than PlanScope ever has.
Awesome. And so tell me then a little bit about, if somebody is starting out and I've got an email list of just under 500, so it's not zero, but it's not 50,000 either. Is segmentation important at that kind of smaller scale? Or
I think it is, because even if you don't plan on doing anything with it yet, I'm always thinking like, it's great that you have 500, 5,000, 50,000 people. And a lot of people, that's what they say, is they've got a newsletter, they've got 500 people on it. But if you were to ask people to say, well, tell me about the composition of that list. Like, why are they there? Why did they join? Who are they? And who could change depending on what kind of newsletter or audience you have. But if you can know that, like, so what we usually help people do and what we've been helping people do is to say, look, when somebody joins your list, you usually capture a first name and an email address, and that's all you have about them. Like, nothing beyond that. What if you could find out a bit about why they joined and what their expectations are with you, and a bit about who they are in a way that serves them. So it's not just for your own purposes. What if we could say, we want to better serve you? So for us to do that, we have a quick multiple choice survey that you just show on your confirmation page. And that data then would then get synced up to their record. So it's not just aggregate data, but it would also get attached individually to like Brendan's record. He's joined for this reason, and so on. So I think like, even if you're just starting out, I think it's useful to have that information. I mean, I've talked to plenty of companies who, when they have relatively smaller audiences, they're still doing this, and it's giving them directional ideas about what products should we create, and what are the things that we can't infer just purely on open rates or click rates or Google Analytics data, which gives geographic data and so on. Like, what if we can know that 40% of our audience struggles with this problem and 20% struggles with that problem? Maybe this indicates, potential products that you could be creating, or, the type of people who resonate best with your content, so you can go get more of them. And there's just a ton of applications that you can use with this. Like a big thing too that is underutilized is when you start to segment out your audience, you can then superimpose it on your reporting and say, not just how much money did we made or did we make, or what is the value of a customer or the value of a subscriber, but how does somebody who, I don't know, is a designer, what are they worth relative to somebody who's a copywriter? And when you start to have that information, you can do so many incredible things, but it's so rare that I think anyone out of the enterprise actually does stuff like that. They go beyond anything beyond their email address and maybe tagging them if they buy from you or something like that.
So let's say I was to do this, and by the way, I have done a little bit in the sense that I have used ConvertKit where I've sent out surveys. I do this probably every 6 months or so, and I ask people to click on a link and it tags them with an interest. And I do that every so often just to see, what are the topics. And I did this recently and gave out a whole bunch of different topics. And the top three that people were interested in listening to on this on my email list are building authority, obviously, generating leads. And the reason why we want to build authority is typically to generate leads. And then I was interested that AI, using AI was actually third. But I also think that there are people out there on this listening to this podcast who think that I cover that a little bit too much, because I have I'd say I've covered in maybe 4 of the last 8 episodes have mentioned AI to some significant degree. So, and I don't want this to be the AI podcast. I will make another one for that. But is that the kind of thing you're talking about, or can you tell me where do I go next? Where would you go if that was you were talking to somebody, you were giving them advice about what would be the next step?
I mean, you can do it through links in the email. That's kind of the easy way of doing it. The only downside is it's cumbersome to ask more than one thing, right? You're probably asking them, like you said, which are you most interested in? Click one of the following. Usually, I think when you've got somebody's attention, so we have internal data that shows if somebody answers one question, the likelihood of them answering questions 2, 3, 4, and 5 are 97% plus. So if they answer that first one, might as well use this to ask either a follow-up question that relates to what they chose. So let's say they chose, they're interested in what you have to say because they want to, generate more leads or something. So then you can ask them a bit about, okay, tell me about your business. Are you, is this something you're doing on the side? Is it a full-time thing? Do you have a team? And you can kind of drill a bit deeper to add more context and color to their situation. And it's just difficult. You can't really have a single email that asks multiple questions. It just kind of falls apart. So what I usually recommend as the best thing to do would be when somebody's most excited, that's around when they opt into your email list, they buy from you, there's some transaction that occurs, right? And usually most confirmation pages post opt-in are like, thanks, check your email, which to be honest is kind of lame. So what we recommend people doing is change that to say, hey, welcome. I want to make sure I get you exactly what you need. I've got a quick 15, 20-second survey, and it's all multiple choice. None of this fill in the blank stuff. And you just rapid fire ask people questions. And then what we're seeing response wise is usually 80 to 85% of all new subscribers, when the questions are phrased correctly, when they're saying they're not too prying and so on, 80 to 85% of all new subscribers will be segmented, which the average for and I'd love to hear your stats on this if you have them, but the average for when you send an email to your list with links, it's less than 30% typically will actually engage with that and do it. So you have higher coverage, and at that point, they're excited. They just literally said, I give you permission to email me. So at that point in time, if you can say, great, I want to make sure you get the right emails from us. How can I best serve you? Why are you here? What do you need from me or from us? That's a great time to ask that information, and that's usually what we recommend people do.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think you're right there. I just checked to see what the stats were on that. I had a 48% open rate on that email, which is kind of the average for my list is 45 to 50. So that's pretty high, I think, decent. And then the click rate on that was 5.1%. So
Yeah.
So the actual the number of people who are actually taking action is
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
it's pretty like it is hard to get people and I think that now some of that may be because like whenever I think about open rate, I always think this is the reported open rate. It's not necessarily the actual open rate
Hmm.
because there's a lot of privacy tools that are not allowing you to know what's happening there, which I fully agree with. Like that's good, but then like I don't know what the what the what is it that we can do to get people to take more action on these things? Like, I think for me, like if anybody's listening to this and is thinking like 45% open rate, that's actually pretty good. Like that's quite a strong open rate, by industry standards. And so I'm very happy with that. But then to see a click rate of 5% is super low. I'm kind of disappointed that it's that low considering how many people are actually looking at that email. So I don't know how to square that circle. I don't know how to fix that, to bridge that gap.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it just depends on how you position the question. Is there anything that it's kind of like when I get NPS survey emails all the time from brands. Like when I go on a flight, a few days later, I'm going to get a survey from the flight. How do we do, or something like that. But there's never anything baked into the question that benefits me in any way. I mean, you could do the cheap thing and say, hey, tell me how you did on the flight, and we'll give you 1,000 air miles or something to your account. But I think the more important thing would be if the question can be posed as, we want to make sure that you get exactly what you need and nothing more. And this is where personalization comes in. So one of the things I do is when somebody joins my list and they share with me, there's one of three core reasons why somebody would join. They want help building an audience, they want help automating their marketing, or they want help with selling more. So they want to turn more subscribers into customers. So when you choose one of those, and again, I'm getting about 85% of all new people joining my list segmenting themselves. So they're answering that question. When you choose one of those, I have a secondary non-live evergreen newsletter that goes out, and it's curated. So if you choose that your focus is on audience growth, every Tuesday for 3 to 4 months, you're going to get an email that's dialed in on just what I've had to say about audience growth over the years. If you answered automation for the first 4 months, just what I had to say about automation in an order that I think makes sense. So I still send out those random emails on Thursday, the live emails, but on Tuesday, they're getting a curated track of content that aligns with what they shared with me. And I make it very clear when they opt in with the welcome sequence that you shared with me that you want help with growing your audience with email or building your email list and growing your audience. Here's my plan to help you. For the next few months, I'm going to be sending you every Tuesday emails about nothing but audience growth. And you also shared with me that you use ConvertKit. I also use ConvertKit. I'm going to also include in these emails tips that you can apply directly to your ConvertKit account. People get that and they're like, holy crap, like this is like, and I've had replies from people saying, first off, that's kind of cool, but they've also said like they really like the fact that it's obvious that I'm listening, even if it's not individual listening. Like I'm not there like wizard boss style, man behind the curtain, like saying, "Oh, Alastair opted in, he said this, I'm going to push him here." I mean, it's automated at this point, but I think the fact that I'm saying I'm listening to the fact that you want to help with automation, so I'm going to deliver you a track of content that is dialed in on automation because that's what you need help with, and that I think goes a long way. And again, it's because I position the question as, if you help me out, I can serve you better. So
And I'm going to go check that out. That's at createandsell.co, right?
yes, yeah,
Cool. I'm just going to put that up on the screen here as well. So
you'll see it when you opt in how that
yeah,
works.
email here. So cool. I'm just going to put that up on screen for everybody. Yeah. So okay. So I'm just aware of time. We got to wrap it up. There are some questions that I always ask my audience. One of those is about building authority. What is the number one tip that you would give to somebody who wants to build their authority?
I think the big thing is, so what's helped me is, I mean, the obvious answer is create a lot of content and make it public. But I think the thing that I think sets a lot of people or keeps them from starting is this idea that they need to be an absolute authority. I learned firsthand that I learn a lot better from somebody just a few steps ahead of me than somebody who is academic ivory tower. It's been ages since they've actually been in my shoes, kind of thing. So I think like a lot of people, which makes sense, think like, oh, there are this space is so saturated. There's already people say talking about email marketing or whatever else. um, who am I? Like, who am I to actually throw my hat in the ring and be another voice, be more noise? But I think when you realize that there is no absolute authority, there's no like, show me a list of all the authorities in the email marketing space. There's no database for that. Instead, it's all relative. It's, I've helped this person, say in my hometown, get their email system set up and running. To them, I am the authority. They don't know about anyone else out there. And I think when I first learned this was with PlanScope, when I would ask people about what are the other project management tools you're using. And because I knew the competitive landscape, I knew my competitors. And a lot of people replied saying, like, wait, there are other tools and stuff. So I think like I wouldn't worry too much about the imposter syndrome that comes with am I just going to be more noise? Because I know that's something I've struggled with and to a degree still struggle with.
Yeah, and I always think our biggest competitor is usually not our actual competitors. Our biggest competitor is usually inaction. So
Yes, exactly.
yeah. Um, the one thing I just want to ask you, and by the way, do you have a hard stop, or are you able to
Yeah,
go 2 or 3 minutes?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So just before I dig into this a little bit, you said create a lot of content and make it public. And I know that there are other people out there who kind of resist the idea of even advising people to make lots of content. Now, obviously, I espouse that idea because that's what I'm doing right here. And I've got this will probably be episode 141 or 142 of this podcast. So I truly believe in creating a lot of content and writing books and publishing, but there's a lot of people kind of feel I don't have time to do that. Why would I want to do that? It feels like it's so much effort. Can you just speak to that a little bit about how you feel about that?
I mean, I think okay. So let's quickly talk about the consulting world because I assume a lot of people are. Is it true that a lot of your audience is probably still doing like still in services or?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
independent consultants, experts in their field, people like that.
So when I hire consultants myself, I want to see a track record that goes beyond any flashy marketing website that they have. I always really enjoy being able to see, oh, like here's like one thing that I've always appreciated is when I can see somebody who they talk publicly about the interactions they have with their clients, maybe questions that come up with a potential client who the example I always give is we had when I had the agency, we had a client who wanted to build a full blown social network type thing, and we were like, well, don't start with the social stuff. Start with like the core unique thing that you're going to build. And we ended up just talking a lot about it because we did a lot of local events at our office, and we did a whole workshop on why you should start with your unique value prop rather than tacking on social stuff. And I think that's the kind of thing that if you can say like, here's my thought process about why I responded to this new project lead in this way. And other people can look at that and see, wow, I like the way that this person thinks. I like the way that they, do business. I think it can only help when you're not just putting this wall of your marketing site between you and the world, where you actually have, where you expose like, here's something we learned on this client project. Here's, we tried out this new way of doing things and it worked really well. And here's what worked, what didn't work, and so on. I think that stuff because eventually you get to the point where you have new project leads, and you can just drop links to this content. Like you can say, and I think it makes you so much more authoritative when you're like, here, I've actually written a 2,000 word article on it. There you go, or something like that, rather than needing to rehash everything kind of on the spot. But again, I've never seen being prolific about creating content hurt me in any way.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I mean, I simply agree with you, but I know that there is the fear of we're making too much content, or it's something I've just spoken with and published an episode with another guy, Stephen Lewis, about the type of content that we should be creating. But I don't want to dive into that because we're coming up on time, and thank you so much for taking the extra couple of minutes. Speaking of things that maybe didn't work, can you tell me if is there a business mistake or failure that you've experienced that you can tell us about what you learned from it?
I think with so yeah, I think so with the W freelancing thing, I think I made the mistake of as it was growing, I bit off more than I could chew. So I mentioned that I had conferences that I ran. I also tried to run like worldwide meetup groups because I figured, look, I'm the circus leader of this group of 50,000 uh, freelancers and agencies. There's a one to many relationship with me and them. How can I create many to many? How can I? Because I knew that if you get smart people in a room together, if I organize that, naturally they'll mingle, and then partnerships will be forged, or they'll get a ton out of that. These connections and so on. So I think the mistake that I made when I look back at that business was I didn't focus enough on the things that were working. I tried to diversify by having doing multiple podcasts and doing events and doing this. And it was really just me. So eventually I got to the point where I started seeing I was spreading myself way too thin, and it did affect the core business. So I think there's something to be said. I'm trying to be a lot better at this now about just focus and seeing what's working and doing more of that rather than trying to do all the because I have shiny object syndrome. I see people doing this on LinkedIn and people doing that on Twitter and people doing this over here, and I'm like, I should do all that too. But yeah, I've come to realize
That's the
always supposed
problem
to
with the
first.
kind of the engineer creator type
Yeah,
mindset.
it really
where
is. Yeah.
where you can do all the things, and that's the hard part. Is there a business book or resource that's been important for you, or that you'd recommend?
Yeah, on my or on my bedside table now at the minute, I'm finally reading April Dunford's Obviously Awesome, which is a book on product positioning, which, to be fair, or to be frank, is something I'm struggling with at the minute with RightMessage, because we've kind of shifted and pivoted a bit. So it's a really great book on just kind of how do you contextualize your product or service in a way that the customers you want to have will relate to. And it's a brilliant book on kind of going beyond the usual positioning statement and coming up with a really good way of contextualizing your business. It's very jobs to be done if that resonates with anyone listening.
Yeah, awesome. And final question is, do you read any fiction at all? Is there anything that you love and
I do
recommend?
read a lot of fiction. I'm in the middle of Ken Follett, who's one of my favorite authors, just released a new book. I forgot the name. It's part of the Kingsbridge series, but it's set in the 18th century. So I read a lot of historical fiction, a lot of World War II historical fiction, and a lot of medieval stuff. I don't read a lot of fantasy or anything like that, but I do a lot of historical fiction. So yeah.
Awesome. I'd just like to get a flavor for what people like.
Yeah.
Brennan, where can people find you if they want to learn more? And I have createandsell.co on the screen here as well.
Yeah. So createandsell.co. If you want to dig into my head, my book, This Is Personal, just was released a week ago, and that's at thisispersonalbook.com. It's available on Amazon and all the usual places. And yeah, other than that, there's rightmessage.com, or find me on Twitter, Brennan Dunn, BrennanDunn.
Awesome. Brennan Dunn, thank you so much for coming on the show.